Not all is doom and gloom in the Warlock world, because Affliction is picking up some steam in the background because it has to, since, listen, we don't know if the final demo changes will be good or bad, but Destruction has to cast Channel Demon Fire, so what is there left for Affliction? Well, good news! I do strongly believe the devs are essentially addressing the ramp-up time necessary for Affliction as well, and we're steadily trying to stray away from a world where you need to cast for 20 minutes before your actual damage comes out. Affliction has undergone leaps and bounds over the years when it comes to how much time it takes for it to finish its rotation and start blasting, and it seems we're getting non-stop improvement as well, specifically to the bottom capstones. Though, let's not, beat around the bush, let's see exactly what it is that we're looking at. First of all, the blue post where the devs have put their thoughts states as such. The number of casts required for Affliction to be properly set up is high, and something that can feel especially punishing in multi-target situations and PvP. Now, we don't know too much about PvP, but in multi-target situations, it does take a little bit to get started, which normally wouldn't be a problem, except for the fact that a lot of other classes just upfront more damage burst than Affliction does, and by the time you actually get to set up all the stuff, mobs are probably around 50% of their HP dead. So the current level of Affliction would probably only really work in super high-end content, which is not what most people do. Definitely not your average Affliction, and having that restriction feels a little bit constricted in terms of how you will want to play your Affliction. You shouldn't feel like, oh, if I don't play high-end content, I should probably not play Affliction. That's just not fun for anybody involved. Furthermore, what the devs have said is that we are replacing Malefic Affliction and implementing changes to Dread Touch and Doom Blossom to make Affliction's rotation more accessible and less punishing. This is cool because this is one of the capstones that have been probably the most interesting and kind of the most new in Dragonflight so often, and that it did seem at the beginning when they implemented these capstones that they have dual functionality for both AoE and single target, but now it's even clearer and even better. So if we take side-by-side talents, what we have now in live underneath Creeping Death is Malefic Affliction, a 2-pointer that says Malefic Rapture causes your active unstable Affliction to deal 13% additional damage up to 39% for the rest of its duration. This is something that you essentially stack up once you have unstable Affliction on the target and constantly cast Malefic Rapture during its uptime, and it ends up dealing quite a bit of single target damage. Furthermore, down below you have one of the choice nodes, which Dread Touch has been pretty much used 100% of the time in single targets so far. It is the only real build that you do here on this side of the talent tree, and what Dread Touch currently does, just to put you up to speed, if Malefic Affliction exceeds 3 stacks, the target instead takes 30% increased additional damage from your damage over time effects for 8 seconds. So what you would essentially want to do is have Unstable Affliction on a target, cast Malefic Rapture 3 times, the 4th time it would actually proc Dread Touch for 8 seconds, and if you cast Malefic Rapture once every 8 seconds, you would be able to maintain this up, which is okay in a vacuum. It is kind of what Affliction does, but this is yet again another thing that you have to maintain on top of your actual dots: Shadow Embrace, Unstable Affliction, Haunt, and now we have Dread Touch. Okay, now what exactly will change for these two? Well, Malefic Affliction will change into Xavius' Gambit. Unstable Affliction deals 30% increased damage. Period. For the 2-pointers. It's simpler, it doesn't imply any active part in your rotation. Okay, it's probably slightly boring, but Affliction is already a pretty busy spec as it is, so maybe this is not the worst thing that can happen, although the previous one could have been okay as well. Overall, you do a little less damage because it's 30%, not 39%, but you don't require any ramp to get there. It's already instant, you'll always have it. And of course, this works better in AoE as well, if you have a priority target, because in AoE, you will almost never cast Malefic Rapture to proc the Unstable Affliction's extra damage, making this particular talent choice and talent node, talent capstone route thing applicable in AoE because we are getting to that as well. First of all, Dread Touch has also been changed, where now Malefic Rapture causes targets suffering from your unstable affliction to take 30% additional damage from your damage over time effects for 8 seconds. So you still have the extra damage, but you don't have to ramp towards it. It's basically the same thing without the actual ramp, which of course is great because the damage is more upfront. You will still have to maintain it, which it's still fine because obviously let's put a little bit of effort into getting that damage out once it also gets buffed. Now, what about the AoE part? Well, Doom Blossom, currently on live, makes it so that if corruption damages a target affected by your unstable affliction, it has a 10% chance per stack of Malefic Affliction to deal shadow damage to nearby enemies. This is very, very, very weird in AoE. Let's not even talk about the fact that it's just not competitive damage with other options that you have out there, but this would essentially mean that in AoE, you would have to have Unstable Affliction up on a target, you would have to ramp up with Malefic Rapture for the stacks to be up there and keep them up, by the way, and then have Corruption deal damage and have a chance to also proc it, while in AoE you pretty much 100% of the time just want to spam Seed of Corruption, unless they make Malefic Rapture also a playstyle, but then you have two conflicting AoE playstyles that we've kind of strayed away from in Dragonflight, and I don't think it's good enough to visit that place once again. So what Doom Blossom does now is when Seed of Corruption deals damage to a target suffering from Unstable Affliction, so basically your one priority target, it explodes, dealing 68% of your spell power and shadow damage to all enemies without 10 yards, meaning that you will, cast your Seed of Corruptions on the target with your Unstable Affliction, which I guess it's good because there's always going to be one primary target with more HP that you might want Unstable Affliction out on that target. The explode damage is pretty high, considering that it's almost double that of Soul Flame and it is uncapped AoE. Now, this obviously is all coming down to tuning, whether or not this is good, but this is definitely a different style of playstyle that you can take. Specifically, I can see it being good in Tyrannical Weeks as well, because it definitely puts more emphasis on Unstable Affliction, which is obviously your single target dot of choice among everything else that you do. And it's cool because we like little tiny explosions to blow up and do a lot of uncapped AoE damage, and uncapped AoE damage is usually what props a lot of specs up into high keys. They might not become meta, I'm looking at you, Feral Druid, that still does a lot of AoE, but it's still not meta, like top Destro Warlock level, but it does give them a chance to actually be competitive in high-end content as well, and all of this with a lot less ramp. This is really cool. I have been playing some amount of Affliction during this season of Dragonflight, and although I really enjoy it, I cannot help but actually hit these walls of, okay, let's say I'm playing Uldaman and I go in to try to, set up on a pack. The setup does require a bunch of globals. It requires me standing still because even though I am Affliction, my most important casts are usually hard cast abilities, specifically Seed of Corruption, which also has a long cast time. And the tank will probably want to pull more mobs so that I can also deal damage, and it takes a while to actually get through of it. Now, the level of content I did on Affliction was a little bit too low and things kind of died very quickly. However, I did see the potential once either my big blaster teammate was out of the question or didn't have cooldowns, or the pool was just perfect for my setup. I actually started to do a lot of damage, so Affliction does actually have damage to be competitive in AoE, because in single target it's fine. We all know Affliction is almost up there with Demo and Destro, kind of like 1% behind, so I don't know why people don't play, because it's just as much single target damage. But in AoE it does take a lot longer to get going, and I think that all of these changes are definitely going into the right direction. Now, there is one last thing that we kind of need to think about, is that these are competitive talents. There are other AoE options that you go for, whether you go the Dark Lair route, the Soul route, or the Haunt route. All of these capstones are surprisingly flexible in their damage profile, so it definitely has some competition there. Now, I don't know if this will fix it. It'll definitely take away some of that ramp. Will that make all the other capstones obsolete if the numbers turn out to be the best? Well, I don't necessarily know, but I think these incremental changes to increasing the quality of life of Affliction, and of course its competitiveness and performance overall in any content whatsoever, is what Affliction needs first and foremost. I don't know if it's gonna stop here. We probably still need maybe a little bit to kind of match our playstyle with the content that we do, but so far it's looking good. What do you think? Is this enough to get you back on the Affliction train? It's kind of cool for me, and I'm definitely gonna test this out as soon as it becomes available to test. So let us know in the comment section down below. Also, thank you patrons for supporting this content. This is made in no small part with the thanks to you patrons, because you're enabling us to do all of this cool content. It definitely, your support is going a long way into making sure that we do everything that we can to give you all of the content out as quickly as possible. So if you're the reviewer, want to support us a little bit more, and you want to be a part of the team, check the link down below in the description, and you'll find a bunch of Patreon tiers with all the good Patreon things you already know so far. Thank you for watching the video. See you in the next one. Bye.
I've been loving it then, I still love it now. Still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. Getting better every day, let me show you how. Cause still, I play WoW. Still, I play WoW. It's getting harder to stay, but at the end of the day, it's a guilty pleasure, so just log in and play. Whether it's classic or retail, I'ma do a /bow. Still, I play WoW.